Then I was watching a hurricane-like storm that grew in great strength, and it flowed from near Indonesia and the Asian waters over there near Japan, China, Taiwan. And it was like a hurricane. It was growing in power and strength, and it rumbled and spread all the way across the Pacific Ocean. And it became green as it hit the west coast shoreline of the United States of America. Look up, for your redemption draws near, but warn the shallow fervently that deep roots are needed now more than ever. Brace, endure, prepare, and use the time you have to reach the rootless ones.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This video is an interpretation of one of Pastor Dana Coverstone's latest dreams that he's revealed called Towers, Trains, and Chains. Now, if you're not familiar with Dana Coverstone, he is a small church pastor in Kentucky. A lot of us have been fascinated by some of the dreams that he's been posting lately. We've seen many of the things that he's seen in his dreams come true after the fact. Some people have dismissed his dreams as not being from God because not everything he's seen has come true yet, but that isn't the pattern we see even in Scripture. There are things that Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Daniel and John saw that have not come true yet. But some of what they saw did come true in their lifetime. So the same, if these are from God, we should expect the same thing. We should see things coming true progressively, but we shouldn't expect all of it to be true right away. We don't require that of the biblical prophets, and not that Pastor Coverstone is a prophet. He doesn't claim to be, but that doesn't mean that these dreams aren't from God. On the contrary, I've spent a lot of time studying them and analyzing them, and I can tell you that they are internally consistent with each other. The symbolism, even when Mr. Coverstone doesn't realize it is consistent with the way these symbols are used in the Bible. So the messaging, the theology, everything is consistent with the Bible, and they're consistent with what thousands of other Christians have been dreaming lately. I've been studying the dreams of hundreds of Christians, and many Christians are seeing the same things. God is revealing the same things to a lot of people. Pastor Coverstones are just simply the most complete and the most detailed and the most and has some very rich symbolism that has some teaching for us. So that said, this particular dream, Towers, Trains, and Chains. The reason I'm providing interpretation is because in Mr. Coverstone's video where he presents the dream, he provides his own interpretation, but I feel like he missed some stuff, and I think he's just not aware of the body of other dreams that are out there, of what other Christians have been dreaming. So he's not fully understanding the import of what he's seen because he's not connecting it as just one more piece of the puzzle to what everybody else has seen. So let's start off. Let's go ahead and watch the first section of this dream.
Here it is. The dream began with a large auction on the field where the Washington Senators were playing baseball. There was no one in the stands, and the lights were off, and the stadium was very, very dark. The auctioneer was masked, not like a COVID mask. It was just his face had like a bandana around it, so you couldn't see. He was also wearing a judge's robe, and those about to participate were of all nationalities, with the corresponding flag of their nation on their jackets. So they were professionally dressed, sitting in some very nice chairs right in the middle of the field that wasn't being played on at that time. They also had their jackets up around their necks, and it seemed to be an attempt to shield their identity, even though the stadium was empty and dark.
Okay, so he sees a baseball diamond, and he sees the Washington Senators playing on the field. Okay, that's almost self-explanatory. Like, we don't have to really explain that, do we? It's the politicians, Washington Senators, playing on the field. Politicians in Washington think they're playing a game. They think they're playing a game. But notice that in this game, there's no one in the stands, so this is a secret game. The lights are off. Light is a symbol for truth, so this is being hidden. People are even wearing night vision goggles, he explains later. So this is a secret game. In the middle, somewhere in this field, there is a single man standing on a platform or podium, I guess. He says the auctioneer is masked. So this individual is masking their identity. who they are. And he says he's wearing a judge's robe. Now, I have to admit, this is the one part of this dream that I'm not fully sure who this is. So I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to take a stab at it. But I'm not certain who this is. But I think from the language, we have to say this is not, I don't believe this is symbolizing an entity or an organization or something spiritual. I think this judge, this mass judge, is an individual. There's an actual person this represents. Not necessarily the Antichrist. I don't believe it's the Antichrist. Could be. I don't think so, though. But I'm going to take a guess. There are buyers, representative buyers who are all around the podium waiting to bid on something. And he says that they're all from all nationalities. And the buyers are also attempting to shield their identity. So they're also engaging in the secret game, the secret auction. What is being auctioned off? What is being auctioned off, as we're going to see, is the sovereignty of the United States. That is what's being auctioned off. Reps from all nationalities reminds us of the United Nations. Okay, the judge. Now, judge, it can literally mean a judge. It could be a judge like a Supreme Court justice. That could be an international court justice. Could be justices. Could be a court being represented here, I guess. Could be that. But because this is a secret auction, I still think it has to be an individual. And I'm going to appeal to what I know from many other dreams, okay, that are out there, which is that if you've seen my other videos that I've been posting recently, or the interpretation I just did of the Wall Street barter dream he had, you know that I believe that what has been revealed in dreams to Christians is that there are different events that are going to happen as part of what I believe is the impact of the red horsemen of Revelation on the United States. I've said repeatedly in my videos and in my book, Revelation Unfolding, that the red horseman is to be released soon, I believe, and that Zechariah 6 says that the red horseman goes to the ends of the earth, which would include the Americas. I believe that the dreams, if you really study all the dreams, there's different categories, and I believe that I've got categories I've called Phase 1, which is riots and chaos in the streets where Americans are just kind of killing one another in a civil war. Phase 2 is where I believe that formal lines are drawn and armies are started to be created, and President Obama comes back in a significant number of dreams to lead an army in a civil war. I call that Phase 2. Phase 3, I believe, comes after that, which is an EMP attack. Many people have seen that. And then following the EMP attack is an actual invasion by Russia and China. Thousands of Christians have seen the invasion by Russia and China for over 100 years, possibly 200 years. If you believe the account of a dream attributed to George Washington himself, who may have had that dream. But the invasion by Russia and China has been seen by so many people, and I call that Phase 4. I believe this dream is portraying that, Phase 4. And in the Wall Street barter dream, that was Phase 3. At the end of it, he saw the storm coming in, which is Phase 4. Okay, that said, to get back to this judge, a judge in the Bible was the military leader of a country, or the leader of a country. When there was no clear king, the leaders of Israel were called judges, okay? Because they decided matters, but they also simultaneously led the country in times of war. So if we go back and we look at the body of dreams for what I call Phase 2, which is Obama as a commander, many of those dreams have Obama at the end ruling things or deciding things from being in a position of power in the United Nations. I don't believe that means he's the Antichrist. I believe he's the head of the Whore of Babylon. That's another video. But regardless, these dreams see Obama ruling things from the United Nations, and we see representatives at this auction from all nationalities, like the United Nations. And President Obama used to be a United States Senator. So, I'm guessing that this may be President Obama auctioning off from the United Nations the sovereignty of the United States, which corresponds to a lot of other dreams that seen Russia and China coming in under the guise of helping us on behalf of the United Nations. Okay, anyways, that's a guess as to his identity, but beyond that, what is clear is that these are politicians who think they're playing a game, and one of them is auctioning off, has enough power and position where he has somehow the authority to auction off the sovereignty of the United States. So let's watch more of the dream.
Dark. As the auction started, and the auctioneer was getting people in place and saying, "Hey, folks, we're about to start," several of the Asian nations gathered together and talked among themselves. Then they held up a card with a symbol that I had never seen before, and I'll express that in just a little bit. Strange symbol on it, and it got the attention of the auctioneer. And the minute he saw it, he declared the auction was over, and a large briefcase was handed by these Asian nation leaders to the auctioneer. And he accepted the briefcase and he shook the hands of 12 different men. There were 12 different specific men, all of Asian background. And then he snapped his fingers and he yelled out the word "now." Not loud, just "now." He said this, at the same time he snapped his fingers, he said "now."
Okay, so what we see is the auctioneer is calling the auction to start. He's just getting people seated. Before the auction has actually even begun, some Asian nations have gotten together in a huddle and they're talking. And they hold up a card with a strange symbol on it. Okay. I look, in the video, Mr. Coverstone says he's going to talk more about that symbol later, but I can't find a place in the video where he does. Maybe I missed it somehow. I would really like to know what that symbol was. But it got the attention of the auctioneer, and he basically, as soon as he saw the sign with the symbol, he said, "Auction over, sold." He's basically said sold. And he took the briefcase they handed him. So that there's a briefcase. This is filled with money. Okay, this is the payment. And it's filled with money to this trader, this auctioneer that is auctioning off the sovereignty of the United States. He took the money and he shakes the hand of 12 Asian men. Now that's interesting. Why 12 Asian men? So this is what's strange. There is not currently an alliance of all the Asian nations. Japan is our friend, China is not. South Korea is our friend, North Korea is not. Taiwan is our friend. The Philippines, we're kind of like this with them right now. There's just, and Indonesia is Muslim, and they're not our enemy, but they're also not the best of friends either. So the question is, what is this? How would 12 Asian nations come into an agreement? Well, again, I'm going to appeal to the other dreams. There is people who have seen the invasion of Taiwan by China. There's people that have seen China launch a nuclear missile at Japan, and then as soon as that first nuclear missile is launched, Japan immediately capitulates and comes under the umbrella of China, agrees to submit itself to China. How would those things happen? Those things couldn't happen in the current political environment. It would be too scandalous. However, in a world where the United States has been removed as a global power, doesn't mean fully conquered yet, but if we go into a period of civil war followed by loss of electricity and power under an EMP attack for 4 to 6 months, we would not be a global threat. We would no longer have superpower status, able to check China or any other evil doing nation that wants to conquer. So if China were ever going to try to take on the United States or do anything like that, taking Taiwan or taking some of these other Asian countries would come first. And in fact, when we get to the next section of the dream, we're going to see there's a storm brewing, but it begins brewing in the Pacific over there in the South China Sea. So my theory is what this represents is that before China comes against the United States, it has consolidated power in the South China Sea and the Pacific. And basically, maybe it has formed an alliance of Asian nations. Maybe it is a new Chinese empire or Asian empire. China and North Korea, easy. You got two right there that would be together in that. China absolutely is going to take Taiwan. That's 3. Later, Mr. Coverstone mentions Indonesia specifically. That would be 4. Vietnam is a communist nation that they would ally themselves with China. Makes sense. That's 5. Japan. Japan is been seen in dreams to capitulate to China pretty easily and pretty early. So that would be 6. South Korea. South Korea would not survive without us against China, North Korea, and Japan. They would have to become part of it. That would just leave 3, well, really 5 more, I think. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so probably Philippines, Singapore, Cambodia. 3 more that seem pretty easy, and I think Malaysia also. So you've got, because China wants to control the sea there. So then the question is, which one is the last one? Is it Thailand? Is it Mongolia to make up 12? I would guess Mongolia, just because they want to have that border solidified against Russia. Could be Thailand. I don't know. Regardless, I think this is telling us that there may be a future Asian empire. Won't last long, of 12 Asian nations under Chinese leadership. China would be the head of this coalition, of course, that ruling the others, collecting taxes, telling them what to do militarily, etc. Anyways, the auctioneer took the briefcase, shook all of their hands, and then says, now. That means it's time to invade.
Said now. Then I was watching a hurricane-like storm that grew in great strength, and it flowed from near Indonesia and the Asian waters over there near Japan, China, Taiwan. And it was like a hurricane. It was growing in power and strength, and it rumbled and spread all the way across the Pacific Ocean. And it became green as it hit the west coast shoreline of the United States of America. And then the storm became like a huge blanket of rain, and it just spread out like if you spilled a cup, and the water just spilled over the entire top of the United States of America. And it kept moving east, and it kept churning all the way. It was moving like floodwaters, like rampant floodwaters that are moving logs and buildings and cars. It was like a flood, like we saw with flooding that we may have seen in recent history. And it just kept churning all the way across the nation. And the rain then resulted in flooding, as I said. And it began.
Okay, so he sees a hurricane-like storm coming from the Indonesia area. Again, this is. And he mentions Japan, he mentions Taiwan. So I believe this is telling us that the Red Horseman is going to impact, as I've been predicting it would, since 2015. I've been predicting the Red Horseman would impact the ends of the earth. So the Pacific and the Americas. But the way it manifests at first is civil war in the United States, phases 1 and 2. And while that's going on here, China will be conducting wars in the South China Sea and in, that hemisphere over there. And they'll be consolidating power and creating this little Asian empire. Well, not little, sorry. He sees the storm rumbling and spreading across the Pacific Ocean. So it's coming towards the United States. He says it becomes green as it hit the west coast of the United States. This matches all the other dreams people have seen where China invades from the west. Okay, now what's curious here is he does not mention the simultaneous invasion from the north and the east by Russia. I think there is a reference to Russia later in this dream, which we're going to talk about, but this dream specifically seems to be focused on the growth of the Chinese empire and its invasion of the United States and its impact on the United States. Not Russia's. But thousands of Christians have seen both countries invading the United States simultaneously, but Russia comes in from the east. China comes from the west. So this dream is focused on the Chinese part. But he says it turns green. So that is have to work to figure that out. But I'm imagining that what he saw was that deep green color that storms get when they're really bad. You know, like when tornadoes come in or something, it turns this green color, the sky does, that is really threatening. Normally, green is a color of life and represents life. This obviously does not represent life, so it's not that. So I think it represents just a very violent storm, and possibly also could be alluding to greed, because the reason China would be coming here is for greed, nothing more. It became a huge blanket of rain, and it just spread out. So this is what everybody else has seen in their dreams, that China comes in on the west coast and they begin invading. There is a lot of dreams where we fight back, we push them back, and it's back and forth, but eventually they win. He says they keep moving east like floodwaters. Okay, so let's watch more of the dream.
And it began to wash away the interstate system, and the asphalt almost seemed like it was melting. And when the storm got to Washington, D.C., it became a tornado, and it drilled into the ground of the city. And then suddenly the rainstorm stopped, and the sun came out. So all of this storm turns into a tornado that literally drills and just removes the ground in Washington, D.C. Sun comes out. And then I saw the tail of hundreds and maybe even thousands of snakes. And they were disappearing into that huge hole in the ground. And then the earth began to fill in from the bottom up. So the snakes go in, and then the ground fills itself up, almost like it was sand shifting, but it was moving up and became level with everything else.
Okay, so he says that the floodwaters began to wash away the interstate system, and it was almost like the interstates were melting. And later it became dirt roads, we're going to see. But that interstate system, you know, is a symbol of a lot of things, but especially it's a symbol of our superpower status. So President Eisenhower is the one who created the interstate system in the United States to facilitate transportation of goods across the country. And it happened right after World War II, and it's part of what launched us and made us this economic power. It represents our ability to transport goods, our ability to conduct commerce, ease of just getting around. It represents the modern America. And that is being melted away. It's being eliminated. It's taking us back to a less powerful state, our primitive state. When the flood got to DC, or when the storm got to DC, it became a tornado. Again, a tornado is a judgment. It's a storm of judgment, and it created a hole in Washington, D.C. Then the storm stopped. So, and the sun came out. What that means is the invasion is finished. Okay, so the invasion is finished, and the next thing are these snakes. The snakes are part of the swamp that Donald Trump was trying to drain. They are the political animals. They are the politicians that were playing, you know, ball on the field. They are the lobbyists. They are the deceivers in Washington that spread lies for their own benefit. When the invasion is finished, China is going to take all of these guys and throw them in a hole and bury them. They're going to be killed. Okay, so all of the politicians who think that they're part of the game and that they're going to retain favor with China are not. They're going to be killed, is what I believe that's telling us, and buried, because the hole is then filled in. All right, let's watch more of the dream.
Then I saw America had dried up, but the interstate system was now replaced with dirt roads. So all the water damage, all the mud is now dry, so to speak. And all the interstates are just now, where the interstate asphalt was, there is now just dry ground. It's not wet, it's not muddy yet. But I also saw that the ground level had a skin on it. And the surface of the concentric boundaries of the United States of America began to be rolled up. In other words, if you think about it this way, if you've ever used a key to open a sardine can and you twist it and you roll it and the metal is rolling like this, I began to see that the ground level skin was curling. It was curling from the east coast towards the west, rolling. The ground was still attached, but the skin was rolling like this, and like something was rolling it. And then I began to see that the dirt roads appeared to be underneath the dirt roads. And now I'm looking below the surface of the earth, and it looked like trains that were almost like a monorail. There were like tracks that were hanging on the bottom of the earth if you were looking up underground. And there was like trains, like a monorail that was pulling. You had a large monorail, and it was, the engines appeared to be basically this train appeared like a monorail, like a train, a large train engine, and then other units behind it. And it appeared to be very large in one long unit. And it was pulling an even longer single unit vehicle. And that behind that was a chain, a very large chain. And that chain was attached to the east coast and the roots in the ground there. And so as those trains began to move west underneath the ground, I began to see the east coast just began to curl, almost like the chain was pulling. As it was pulling, the surface of the ground was going with it. And they simply rolled up as a curl as the train was pulling on them.
Okay, so as the rain dries up, we see that the interstate system has been converted into dirt roads. America is now returned to a primitive state. We're no longer a modern superpower. We're completely decimated. We're just in agricultural mode now. People are going to have to farm to make it. And this is kind of how China and Russia and whoever else is involved would want it. They don't want us being competition. They want us reduced to this state. This is one of the more curious parts of the dream. He talks about this surface, this skin over the country. What does that represent? Well, he kind of, in his interpretation, he implies that it's like a mask or something. I don't think that's really the right interpretation. The surface of a country, the skin of a nation, would either, if you're just alluding to the physical nature of a land, it could be the topsoil. I don't think that's it though. I think what the skin of a country is its people. Its people. And the surface, he said, began to be rolled up like a sardine can. It began rolling up like a sardine can. Why? Because the political leadership, the snakes, have already been taken care of in DC, and they've been buried. And now, the sardine can, the surface, the skin, the people are being rolled up from the east, from DC, all the way back to the west. They invaded from the west to the east, and now, what happened before was military conquest. Now, they are removing all the people from the land. Sardine, the little fish are being removed from the land. And under the surface, he sees these monorail trains. This is, again, a detail that's a little bit confusing, but if you think about it, what does it mean? Well, they're under the ground, so this is, he's kind of seeing them underneath, like he's been taken under the dirt and seen it from underneath. Now, there are not obviously real trains under the earth doing this. He sees that they have chains on them that are pulling, the trains are going west, and they're pulling they're rolling up the surface from the east towards the west as they go. Because they're under the surface, this means that they are spiritual forces. The fact that they're trains means they're relentless and strong and long, meaning it's a long process, it's powerful process, and it's a strong, it's a relentless force, like it's going to keep going. There's no stopping a train is kind of the thought. But why monorail? Why that kind of a train? Well, I think that just says this is in the future. This is a future spiritual force that will be removing the skin of America, the people of America, from its land and rolling it up. Anyways, let's watch more of the dream.
And as the trains pulled west, I also saw there were towers going up, and these towers looked like prison guards, or prison guard towers, over the area where the nation. So as soon as the skin, I'm just going with the skin. As soon as the skin of America, the United States of America, was curled over and kept going west, these towers would just simply pop up. It looked like guard towers. And I also realized that the red soil was now muddy, and it was red. Where the skin was being pulled up, the ground was now red. Not just dirt, it was red, and it was muddy. And it stretched across the face of the entire country.
Okay, so as the trains are pulling the chains and the surface of the country is being rolled up, prison guard towers are being erected. These are concentration camps. The people of America are being rounded up from every nook and cranny, I believe, is what it's teaching us, and put in concentration camps to either be killed or exiled, removed to other places. As the skin is being rolled up, the ground behind it, he says, is bright red and muddy. This is blood. There's a lot of death accompanying this because people will try to defend themselves, they'll try to resist, and there's probably just a lot of murdering by the soldiers themselves that goes on as people are being rounded up. But as people are being rounded up and put in these camps, there's a lot of blood. There's a lot of blood, and it turns the ground muddy. And it goes across the entire country. It goes from east all the way to the coast of California. So let's watch a little more of the dream.
And where the capitals had been, there were towers with bright flashing yellow and blue lights. And where Washington stood, the Capitol building and the White House had a fence around them both that appeared to be about 50 feet high. And there was razor wire attached top to bottom. It wasn't strung like this, it was strung like this. Razor wire 50 feet high around those walls on the outside of them.
Okay, so he says where the capitals were these towers that are flashing lights. I believe what he meant is that the state capitals, like every state has a communication center, like a headquarters, so to speak, of these occupying forces, and they're flashing yellow and blue lights. I don't know, and he didn't know what those yellow and blue lights represent. I don't think we can interpret them normally because yellow is the symbol for truth and blue is the symbol for God. It's the divine color. And this clearly isn't God's truth being flashed. So I'm just going to take a guess. We talked about a possible future Chinese empire, Asian empire of 12 Asian nations led by China. Maybe the future flag of that empire is the symbol that's on the sign that is held up at the auction. And maybe the colors of the flag are green and blue. Maybe. That's my best guess. I don't know. It says the White House and the Capitol had fencing around them 50 feet high and had razor wire strung vertically like this on the outside of the wall. So that means Washington, D.C., the political headquarters there in D.C. is just locked down. Locked down. Interesting that it's not destroyed. I would think it had been destroyed, but it's not. I guess it was preserved to remain a seat of power or a visible sign of power for the United States. So I also think that if you remember the snake chain dream that Coverstone had about the cherry trees and all the states getting locked down, I think that's related to this as well. I would go back and watch that one again in connection with this, and I think it might make more sense to you. Regardless, this is talking about the country is occupied, people are being removed, and is locked down. All right, let's watch a little more of the dream.
And also I saw that in the towers there were bags of white and yellow fleas, not black colored fleas, yellow and white fleas. And these bags were being emptied around the towers. And these insects began spreading through that entire region. and the train chains continued to pull until the surface level of the nation popped off as it got to California. And as it just kind of rolled like this, it finally snapped, and that skin began to float. And it floated up towards the sun, basically just like Icarus. If you remember, if you're familiar with the story, the mythological story of Icarus, it kept flying higher and higher up towards the sun that was at full brightness now. And as it floated like this up, the coasts, east and west coast, both began to burn. And then it faded away. If you've ever seen flash paper, I was a children's pastor for many years and used flash paper, and you light it and it just disappears. That was what this, as it got close to the sun, it just burned and disappeared. And then
Okay, so in each of the towers, there are bags of fleas, white and yellow fleas. And I'm just going to say for the record, I think Mr. Coverstone's interpretation of this is completely wrong. And I'm sorry, it's just wrong. He thinks that these fleas are going after white and yellow people. That's not the case. They are white and yellow people. It's the opposite of what he thinks. The bags are being emptied out into the countryside around the towers. So what do fleas represent? They're a sign of poverty. So since the skin has been removed from the United States, I believe it's showing us the people of America are being killed and rounded up and put in camps to be exiled. This is often what empires do. They remove a people from the land and they replace it with their own people. So the United States is being reduced to a agricultural powerhouse for China. China wants our farmland. They don't want it to be an economic competitor. They want our farmland, our very fertile farmland, for themselves, and they need more room for their people. So they are importing their peasants, which are represented by the fleas. They're bringing in their peasants, the white and yellow fleas, and distribute them out into the countryside. Each tower is a headquarters of sorts, and they're managing the logistical distribution of the new population. Now, why white and yellow? Well, Russia has not been mentioned in this dream very much. This dream is focused on China. But Russia is also going to be involved in this invasion and occupying force. And I think the white fleas are Russians and the yellow fleas are the Chinese or Asians. I think that's what it's saying. The trains kept going all the way across the country. When they get to California, the rolling skin just pops off. And he says the skin begins to float up towards the sun. It floated higher and higher until it just then burned up like flash paper. Exactly what that means, not sure. Two possibilities. The people have been removed from the country, and then they are killed or exiled. They disappear from significance. It could also be referring to the rapture, okay? That could be referring to the rapture. If so, then there's a little bit of a time frame established here, because the rapture is in Revelation 14, which is after the mark of the beast, etc., which I don't have time to go into here, but it would be in the second half of the tribulation. And I don't believe the actual invasion by Russia and China is going to happen until we're about a year or two into the tribulation. So it means that this whole process may take 3 or 4 years. Not sure. We'll see. All right, let's go ahead and watch a little more of the dream here.
And then I saw the chains continue to stretch over the Pacific, and they were moving basically on the ocean floor. Those trains kept pulling, and they were still pulling chains attached to this nation, and they kept pulling them, dragging them towards the Far East nations.
Okay, so we saw that the chains and the trains kept going all the way across the Pacific Ocean. The trains just kept pulling America, uniting it and making it part of the Asian empire. I think that's what that really means. You know, this is too far really in the future for us to, I think, predict 100% exactly what it is referring to or what it means. But I think that's what it is that because this land will have been filled with Asians working the land, that they will become closer and closer affiliated with the Asian empire. and not so much with the Russian coalition, the Russian Empire, even though I believe Russians will also be coming in. Okay, let's watch a little more of the dream.
And that was then the man that I see so often. He appeared in the middle of that empty baseball stadium, and he spoke very, very softly. In the dream, I actually had to kind of lean in to hear him, what he was saying. And he said, "Don't worry about the red dragon, as the red dragon has worse enemies than it knows. And the spirit of Antichrist walks the earth and whispers in the ears of the kings at the moment. He is tempting their pride, taunting their power, and they are laying the tracks for the train of deception to pull the world into its grip, his grip. Look up, for your redemption draws near, but warn the shallow fervently that deep roots are needed now more than ever. Brace, endure, prepare, and use the time you have to reach the rootless ones."
Okay, so now we have the man who almost certainly seems to be Jesus giving the message, as he always does at the end of these dreams. By the way, this is another evidence that these are from God. Either Pastor Coverstone is just making these dreams up, which would be pretty heinous for someone to do, or they're from God, because they always end the same way. The same man is always giving a message. And the words he speaks do resonate with me. They tell me they're from God. I do believe this is Jesus speaking to us. That's my personal belief. But the man appeared back in the empty baseball stadium. So the baseball stadium is empty now. There's no more games being played. And he spoke very softly. This is different, that he's speaking softly. Why is he speaking so softly? I think for the same reason that this dream depresses me more. It depresses me more than all the other dreams that Coverstone has had. It's just sad. It's very sad. It's very sad. And I think Jesus is sad over it. But he says, don't worry about the red dragon. Now, Coverstone thinks this is the red dragon of Revelation. It is not. The red dragon is referring to China alone. The red dragon of Revelation is the whole world empire beast system that has ruled over Israel for so many thousands of years. This red dragon is China. It says, don't worry about the red dragon, as the red dragon has worse enemies than it knows, as it will find out in the Valley of Armageddon. The red dragon thinks it's growing, and it is not fully aware of the power of the Antichrist, which is growing alongside it. Which is the next thing said. And the spirit of Antichrist walks the earth and whispers in the ears of kings at the moment. So, if you've seen my other videos, you know I believe there is a strong candidate for the Antichrist right now, who will begin building the Islamic empire, the Islamic caliphate. And he is going to be whispering. There is a spirit of Antichrist manipulating world leaders, but I think also the Antichrist will be encouraging other world leaders to do things that destroy the world in preparation for the expansion of the Antichrist empire, at the same time weakening those kings and their empire. So the Antichrist is allowing others to expend their resources, weaken themselves, lose their people, conquering things, while he grows strong. He is tempting their pride. He's telling them, go ahead and expand. Go ahead and do these things. You're a powerful leader. You need to show it. Taunting their power. Again, teasing them, getting them to expand, to satisfy their own pride and ego. They are laying the tracks for the train of deception to pull the world into his grip. So I think the trains of deception is referring to these trains that are pulling the chains. So why trains of deception? Because China, in this case, for example, the red dragon, thinks that it is conquering the United States for itself. It thinks that it's doing all this for its own glory, for its own self. And it's not. It's weakening itself by expending and using up its resources and its people getting killed in order to expand. It's spreading itself thin so that the world can be pulled into the Antichrist grip. He says, look up, for your redemption draws near, but warn the shallow fervently that deep roots are needed now more than ever. So Jesus, when he says warn the shallow, okay, shallow means those shallow, lukewarm Christians that aren't pursuing God well, that aren't engaged well in the three habits of prayer, Bible, and fellowship. But he says deep roots are needed more than ever, okay? And yes, that's referring to Bible, it's referring to prayer. But roots, agriculturally, as far as an agricultural symbol go, roots symbolize fellowship, being rooted in the kingdom with a community of believers. Those Christians that are in fellowship with other believers, strong fellowship, will be most protected. That's what Jesus is teaching us. So if you were a Christian who's not attending church or does not have a close community of Christian friends, get connected. This is what Jesus is telling you. Get rooted in fellowship. Do not let coronavirus or any other apathy, nothing. Don't let anything else separate you from the church. You need to be in church. You need to be in Bible study. You need to be connected to other Christians. He says, brace indoors, prepare, and use the time you have to reach the rootless one. So for those of you who are strongly following Christ, our job right now is to find weak, lukewarm Christians and get them in fellowship, get them rooted. That is what he's asking us to do. Anyways, that is my best interpretation of this dream. Obviously, it is portraying future events. I could be wrong. I think that in consideration of all the other dreams out there, this interpretation makes a lot of sense. So I hope it's been helpful to you. And as I may be doing a few other interpretations of some of his dreams, I think the Lincoln dream and the snake chain dream are two that I'm planning on doing at some point in the future. But stay tuned, guys. I'm just putting them out as fast as I can. I have a lot going on in my life too, so I'm just trying to stay ahead of it. But thank you for watching.